When I consider a diary, I always go back to my childhood pink plastic diary with a padlock on it. And it was a private space for me to record the present, to daydream about the future, and to even reminisce about the past. And that, to me, is a really important function of a diary. The magic then that happens with a diary quilt is that I get to use abstraction to create that padlock that I had as a kid. And that abstraction allows me to work on things that are raw or vulnerable from the present moment that I wouldn't want to share publicly as a story, but I can put them into that diary quilt. The act of making diary quilts is something that I love to do, I've returned to for years, and that I teach as well. I love seeing students and other quilt makers roll around these ideas and depart from telling the stories of other people and depart from feeling like they have to add every detail so that the viewer can understand and read like a book what happened. And instead, they have that feeling of playfulness and creativity and nuance. That ambiguity, I think, makes it interesting for the maker, interesting for my students, and especially exciting for the viewer to get to see what is happening through that lens of abstraction. Looking back at my diary quilts, it's very interesting to notice the way that it is a historical document and a log of what my life was like when I was making them. I sometimes will notice a bit of fabric or think about, oh wow, that's when I realized I was going to stop wearing that cardigan that I mended 20 times and instead put it onto a quilt. I also can forget the idiosyncrasies of how I fill in a calendar or what felt like a momentous month in my life. But the giant quilted outlines around November, for example, are things that allow me to dig in and remember how important something felt at the time that I was making it. It's been amazing to understand that what looks obvious to me isn't obvious to the viewer. But if I give them that little kernel of a calendar, or that I was tracing things, or that it's an aerial view of my studio, suddenly a whole new world opens up for them, and that holding at a different angle can be invigorating. And then suddenly they've got another 5 minutes of enjoyment of looking at the quilt and holding it in that new light that is really beautiful and exciting to see and to feel them understanding the work more deeply and enjoying spending a great length of time with the work. As an artist, I love to do research, so I've read a lot of books in the last few years about diaries and their importance and how people approach them. And also I've taken a class on writing memoir, and that practice of writing on paper with words helped define for me how much I love instead making a diary with fabric. The act of having a diary, I think, is very important for historians. It gives them an insight into what everyday ordinary life was like and what I do with my clothing or the outline of my cell phone or so many of those little bits of artifacts and things that I'm up to. So I think there's an inherent worth in any person doing a diary or working with the idea of diary. I'm Heidi Parks, and I make quilts in Milwaukee, Wisconsin.